Do you ever look at these kind of props and think, how are you so cute?
It's so fluffy!
Hello everyone, how are you? Today I'll be sharing some modeling tips to achieve the stylized chubby look while I model these props. Okay, tip number 1 is size related. For simple shapes like this one, think about the real form but make it thicker. Look at the hole in the middle, how much more cute and stylized the donut looks when the shape is chunkier. Let's smooth it with a subdivision modifier. Let's move on to the bread roll, and here I'm gonna share my tip number 2, which is using proportional editing for achieving a curvier, smoothly deformed mesh. You could also use the sculpt tools or even other modeling techniques to make the objects look imperfect, if that is the style you are going for. Have a look at these two stylized chunky books, for example. The second one doesn't have a perfect uniform shape. Now let's move on to a simple object, the ball. Here I'm gonna use a combination of two modifiers. A solidify modifier to add some thickness to the model, and a subdivision modifier to make it look smoother. Gonna add a couple more details to the bowl, such as a base, and remember you can toggle on and off the modifiers in edit mode to see the geometry better while modeling. If after adding the subdivision modifier some edges look too round and too soft, you can add some support loops. To make a hand mixer, we can use a modifier we haven't used yet, and that is a bevel modifier to smooth the edges. Let's use the inset and the extrude tools to model the handle. Let's also add a subdivision modifier, and this is a usual combo of modifiers as well. Another tip is to bevel the edges in edit mode, not just using the bevel modifier. And here the edges are looking odd, so let's try by taking the subdivision modifier on top of the bevel modifier. But now the edges on the front of the model had changed, so let's add a support loop. To make the wires, you can use a curve of some type and increase the depth value. And here we have a simple stylized object that looks smooth. We can make the wires longer even if the shape doesn't obey to a realistic proportion. Now let's model the rolling pin. We could use fewer vertices since I'm gonna add a subdivision modifier later on and it's gonna end up looking round anyway. If you compare the proportions of my final object to a real one, you'll notice mine is chubbier and shorter, almost as if we had taken the original shape and squished it. Analyzing the shape of stylized and realistic objects is a really helpful exercise. For example, have a look at this carrot's scale. It is shorter and chunkier than what carrots usually look like. After adding the subdivision modifier, we need to add some support loops near the edges. By scaling this middle edge loop, we can make the shape rounder. You could even use this tip for turning an object into a chubbier one, like in this example where I modeled a shard and then by scaling up its middle edge loop, I made it look rounder. Now we can model this kitchen canister. And here we're gonna be using only one modifier, the subdivision modifier. If you can't scale two edge loops towards opposite sides, make sure the pivot point is set to median point. Bevel this bottom edge loop, and if you press C, you can toggle overlapping on and off to avoid any geometry problems. As you can see, using these simple commands such as inset faces and extrude, you can model these props. Unlike with the bowl, here we don't need a solidify modifier because we created the edges with the extrusion tool. And by adding a middle loop cut and scaling it, we can make this part rounder, just like with the rolling pin. Let's slide this edge loop by pressing double G. And for modeling the rest of the canister, I kept using simple editing tools that don't really need further explanation of what you see here. For the lid, I'm gonna use a cube and subdivide it. You may be asking yourself why not use a sphere? Well, that's because a subdivided cube has a better, more regular topology, and this way we are avoiding any pole pinching problem we might have later while making the materials. Extruding and scaling is another technique you'll want to master to create these objects, and you can always import a reference image and with X-ray mode enabled, trace the picture while using these tools if it's hard for you to model without any visual help. Now let's move on to modeling this shard. And here I don't have a specific tool to recommend you, but as you can see, these props we are making are rounder than their realistic counterparts. So we are basically changing up their shape. And that's what stylization means, not realistic. But beware, because there's more than one type of stylization. For example, these two are stylized objects, but one is sharper and the other one is rounder. But none of them is realistic. So, when you want to make a stylized model, think about what kind of a specific look you want. Reference images will help you a lot with that. Simple details can also add a bit more flair to your models, and for that I'm also gonna model a tag. Here we could use either the extrusion tool in edit mode or the solidify modifier. After modeling all of this, I set up this scene. As you can see, I scaled the props down a bit. You could add some cute details, such as this napkin inside the bowl. To make the cloth, I just added a plane and I subdivide it. Add cloth physics to the plane and set the ball to collision. This part is trial and error. I changed the position and the scale of the plane several times. And hit play. Pause wherever the cloth looks decent and add a subdivision and a solidify modifier. In the frame you like, apply the cloth modifier. In a sculpt mode, using the grab tool, you can take the sides and the middle down. The camera settings will make a difference as well. I set mine to orthographic. Another option is to set your camera to perspective and choose a long focal length such as 100. Shallow depth of field is another thing you could add. And then we could add some lights and simple materials, but that, my friends, is a subject for another video. If you'd like to see a video about lighting and material settings for these props, let me know in the comments. And if you made it this far, thanks for watching and see you in the next one. Bye!